Okay, so I am really excited for this video. I'm going to walk through what it takes to dynamically show multiple products to your customers within a single email in Customer I/O. So products is loosely defined. Really, it's anything that you're storing, like an external database, stored in a different area in Customer I/O called a collection. So I'm not going to go through collections right now and like what it entails to build them up. But here's a view of an example. So this is actually a client that I've been working with called WorshipServe. They connect churches and musicians or artists together in like a marketplace. And so the musicians are their product, right? And so we've created this test collection called artists with a bunch of fake artists here, their names. It's basically the database of their information. We were building a campaign that would say, like, let's say you requested an artist and the artist decided to decline that request. Well, we want to resurface other artists that match the criteria you were looking for. Well, we can do that dynamically in Customer I/O. So we've stored artists in a collection, and here's their information. And in messaging, we will reference this and then surface it to show it. You can think of a collection essentially like a table, okay? So the first thing within a campaign, in a workflow, you can, I'll back out right here, you can in order to pull collection information in, we actually have to query it. So there's this query collection step, and we pull it in and you open up a window like this. Okay, so in an artist case, a lot of the churches that this company is working with are in Florida. But if I live in Miami, I don't want WorshipServe to suggest an artist that lives in Tallahassee, right? Like I want somebody in South Florida. So when we query the collection, we only want to pull artists that are in the same city. So you can add these filters here or query conditions to only show results that match what you want. So in this instance, what we decided to show was that if the person city is Miami, and if the person city, the customer city needs to match the artist city, right? So in this case, for my record here, I live in Miami, and so it pulled a list of artists in Miami. Now there's other filters that you can put on here to like limit to one result. We're going to start with one result, right? We're going to surface up one artist that we think would be a good fit for you. So we ask Customer I/O to only return in a randomized manner an artist that lives in Miami. All right, so we got this John Jacobs guy who's a drummer. Cool. What happens then is the data from that collection has to be stored on a profile attribute. So we pick that here and I put it in as other artists. And if we look at it, it stores it as a JSON output and all the values are there. So now that it's in this attribute, I can reference it in messaging. So let's pull up a message. So again, we're trying to suggest artists because the previous artist declined. And so we said, hey, like that artist is unavailable. Here is a suggestion. You use the liquid code just like you would any other attribute because that's the way it's stored. And since it's in a JSON, it's nested. So you have customer, which looks at the person. You have the attribute name next, which in our case is other artists. And then you're looking for the value or the key pair, which will then return the value, okay? So we wanted to put in their first name, their last name. We wanted to list the services that they had and as well as show the hourly rate, okay? We also wanted their thumbnail to dynamically show. And we can use that with a liquid code. All right, so we'll just focus on this content here. This is what will dynamically change. So if we go to preview and we pull in that record, here's the field values again that you can see. And it was able to reference it. So they went through the flow. The collection data was stored on the other artist's attribute, which we could then pull into messaging, okay? So we got John Jacobs, his services, and his hourly rate. All right, so that's one. So any of the data that's in the collection then it will be stored in this attribute, can be pulled into the content of the message. Great. I'm able to suggest one. What if I wanted to suggest multiple products, or in this case, artists? We can do that. You just have to make sure you call out which record you're pulling in. All right, so let's jump back to our step where we're querying results. If we choose not to limit results to just one, we can choose a number. And in this case, we had 10, but only 2 were returned. So we've got John and now Lucian. Again, results were randomized, but we've got 2 now. And when it stores 2, it still puts them in the profile attribute, but it looks something more like this. There's 2 different records stored in this JSON output. So then it complicates it just a little bit how you need to pull it. You have to indicate which record you want to pull. And this is actually record 0. The first record is record 0 when you're using liquid code. So this is what it would look like. It's a good idea to create fallbacks. So if something messed up and there wasn't like a first or second record that the content doesn't show, right? So we put this if statement at the beginning that says if in customer the other artist's 0 record, meaning the first record in these brackets, is not blank, then we will show all this data. Okay, so you add this 0 here and to the end of the other artist attribute that calls out which record you want to pull, and then the rest is essentially the same. That we will bring in their first name, their last name, their hourly rate. So the fallback comes into place here where it's like if we only returned one value, say, right? Because we're pulling multiple, but there might be a case where we actually don't pull multiple artists. There's only one match. Well, if there's only one match, this 0 record won't work. And so we would want the fallback to be the normal 1 rate thing like we did before. I hope that makes sense. So you'll see that this matches this, right? It's the same stuff because of the fallback. Then we have a new section for the second artist we want to suggest, which is now artist 1. And we have the same fallback in place that if it's not there, we're not going to show it. And the values have that same qualifier. They have that 1 in brackets between every key here. And it will dynamically pull everything in. So you can see here that we've got Lucian here at the top because it was all randomized, and John here at the second. There is this weird thing with Customer IO's preview sometimes that when you're dynamically pulling in images, it won't show them. But don't be alarmed. If that ever happens to you, just send yourself a test and they'll show up and it will all work. It's just like a little quirky bug that they've got in their system. That isn't always there, actually, by the way. So that's how you can dynamically. So like say I was an ecomm store and I wanted to pull in several new products to suggest. This is how I do it using liquid code. And obviously, I'm just doing it from a drag and drop editor, and there's probably a lot more flexibility if you use an HTML template, but it can be done in both. And that's how you do it. You'd pull it, and you can customize and you can completely customize and show these sections and content, images, CTAs, and links. You see, I've got the same code up here just for like the thumbnail and the link, and that'll dynamically show products. So I will put the code, the example code, below that you can copy and use, and you'll be off and running. So hope that's helpful.